Jeez. So even though I switched to Wi-Fi, it continued broadcasting on my 3G and incurred $50 worth of overcharges. That's fun. Hopefully it's still recording though, and everything's good here. Let's reset the timer though. That's not fun. Alright, sorry about that. Continuing where we left off. Oh man, this has really ruined this chapter. It's a long chapter too. I spent so long on this. Alright, back to what she was saying. I'm trying to prove my dream false, she told him. My dream told me not to come to Toronto or something bad would happen, so I figured I'd run an experiment to see whether or not it came true. She noticed, only just then, that not once had she seen him lean against the bar, or waver, even in the slightest. She hadn't even seen him shift weight. He was standing abnormally still. That sounds dangerous, he told her. You must be very brave. Or maybe something else. Stupid, she suggested. Suddenly she felt a strong urge to come clean with him. After all, she could trust him, right? To be honest, I also really came because I'm lonely. It's kinda my little secret. He seemed to chuckle to himself. Well, I have a secret too, he told her. We're all lonely. Everyone here is lonely in some way, to some degree. People like you and I just feel it more because we don't try to fill the void with all this. Really? She asked. I just always figured that once I got to your age, everything would be different. My age? He asked with a raised eyebrow. How old do you think I am? She didn't want to answer, and it seemed he was being rhetorical anyway. He changed subject. So, what do you think will get you? He asked. What? Your dream, he explained. What do you think it was warning you to avoid? A mugger? A car crash? A monster? Rachel laughed. I don't believe in monsters, she told him. Pity, he said. I do. I've seen them. He smiled at her. It suddenly occurred to Rachel how natural it felt talking to this man. She found he had no problem hearing him over the music, and despite her talking fairly quiet, he hadn't seemed to have any problem hearing her. Are you worried? He asked. That I might be what your dream was warning you against. She shook her head. I trust you, she told him with certainty. Of course you do, he said with a smile. Would you like to get out of here? Rachel scanned the crowd for any sign of Jason, Mike, Gordon, or Tanya. None of them were anywhere to be found. The man grabbed her arm. Come with me, his gray eyes pleaded. All right. Scene change, scene change, woo, scene change, woo. She always loved walking around downtown Toronto. She liked being able to look up and see buildings stretching towards the stars. She felt like she was walking through the center of human civilization. The cities of the world were like humanity's greatest achievements. All those millions of people living together, coexisting peacefully for the most part. We've yet to formally introduce one another, the man said with a bow. It's a pleasure to meet you, madame. My name is Eckhart Gaines. He straightened and offered her his arm. Rachel, she said quietly and without all the flourish. I have a strong-rooted contempt for the city, Eckhart said as they crossed the street. It's the smell, you see. Before cars were invented, the streets always smelled of manure. But at least that smell was natural. Nothing about this city is natural anymore. Like the sickening clean of a hospital. He shuddered. Rachel studied him with interest. How old are you? She asked. He waved her question aside. Never mind that, he said. Have you had many other warnings in your dreams? What? Asked Rachel. For a second she'd forgotten all about her dreams. No, she'd answered after a moment's thought. I like you, he told her. Despite being so young, you have a real sense of maturity. You just aren't like the other girls your age. Rachel couldn't help but feel like his compliment fell flat. After all, he knew almost nothing about her. Even the way he'd worded his compliment seemed off. Because he didn't say of her age. Okay. The line was actually, You just aren't like the other girls of this age. Of this age? Her phone vibrated and she pulled it from her pocket. Jason Stride said, "Hey Rachel, where did you go?" Oh, it's all spelled poorly too, because he's drunk. "Hey Rachel, where did you go? Mike and I are looking for you." "My friends are looking for me," she told Eckhart as she began to text back. Eckhart looked her in the eyes and said, "Put your phone away. Your friends aren't important anymore." Rachel put her phone away. "I'm really falling for you," Eckhart said, "and I think you are falling for me too." His eyes pierced right into her skull, like lasers. She hadn't noticed it until he brought it up, but he was right. She could feel it in her heart. She was falling for him. They'd only just met. It was ridiculous to assume she'd found love. But what if she had? And was such an older guy. Would her parents approve? The implications raced through her head, while Eckhart watched her carefully. They stopped outside a small 3-story apartment with bricks painted an ugly green. "My place is up here," he told her. "Would you like to come up?" Her heart did a backflip in her chest. Everything was moving way too fast, but how could she stop it? His eyes were just so inviting. "Yeah," she said. "I'd love to see her place." He led her upstairs and led her into his apartment. It was a small one-bedroom, with a big living room, hardwood floors, and almost no furniture. There was also no artwork on the walls, or nearly any form of personalization. As soon as the door closed, Eckhart grabbed her and began to kiss her. His lips were cold and methodical, but they tasted sweet and alluring. She'd never kissed anyone before, but was amazed how easy it came to her. His large body loomed over her as he had to lean almost an entire foot to reach her. Picking her up quite suddenly and easily, he carried her into the bedroom. She was happy to note that despite his lack of furniture, he did have a bed. He laid her gently on the bed and held himself over her, his breath warming her nose and cheeks. His lips pressed firmly against hers, and his hand reached under her shirt. His hand was cold against her belly, and she shied away. "Please stop," she said as she pushed him away. "This is getting really intense and weird. You're like 50 or something." This couldn't be happening. Her heart was beating so heavily against her chest that he must have heard it too. He locked his eyes on her again and said, "But admit it, you're kind of liking it. You don't want to leave." She had to admit, she'd never been this excited in her life. It was like a rush, and the rush felt good. He leaned in close again and kissed her. He then pulled away and began brushing his lips against her neck. For a split second, Rachel was sure she'd seen something weird. His teeth. It was almost as if she saw fangs. But that was impossible. Besides, she knew she had nothing to fear from Eckhart. She could trust him. And that's the end of the chapter. The next chapter is chapter 3, Underage. So, that was a somewhat intense ending. I apologize that I screwed up the chapter a little bit by trying to broadcast the entire Twitch stream on 3G. That's a horrible idea. Spent all my bandwidth for the month, cost myself $50 in overage charges, thanks TELUS. And then it interrupted the feed, even though I was on Wi-Fi, because I guess it didn't switch over the feed. And then, yeah, so I'm going to have to release this podcast in 2 parts. I apologize that this is probably the second part now. That sucks. But what can you do? It really, I don't know, I think I'm more disappointed. Like, I know that I'm broke as shit, and that $50 is, like, a huge deal to me. That's like almost an entire shift worth of work now that I'm going to have to spend just paying off this horrible mistake that I made. But, what sucks is that it ruined that emotional moment, because that scene, that party scene, basically the moment she spotted Eckhart, it's like, you really wanted that to be a complete experience. You wanted to be absorbed in that moment. I don't know if you noticed, but the way he kept locking eyes on her before saying things, and then that somewhat seemed to change even her inner monologue. That was something I was playing with that chapter. I was trying to play with the idea that like inner monologues, her inner monologue at least, wasn't always going to be necessarily um, completely accurate or trustworthy. You can't trust everything she's saying because, she's being manipulated. And so like the way she is questioning him, and then he says something like, "You can trust me," and then she's like, "I can trust him," and it's like, what's going on here? I wanted to really kind of throw the reader off their ease, and I think in a way that chapter succeeds at that. If nothing else, it succeeds at that. So anyway, this has been a another audiobook release of 99geek. .ca's story of a suburban fantasy. Remember that if you enjoyed this, you can find the rest of this book on my Patreon, patreon.com/99geek, or you can go to 99geek.ca and find links to all kinds of things, including Amazon, where you can buy this book. But seriously, it's cheaper just to go on Patreon, subscribe for $1, download it and read it, and if you want, unsubscribe after. But I mean, there's a whole bunch of other new content. Like, this is just season 0. There's still season 1, which contains 3 books at once. 5 now, actually, in Act 2. And, including a sequel to this one, and a bunch of other things. I have over 1,000 pages of content now there, on that site, that you can check out. And there's links to all that at 99geek.ca. On top of that, I recently did another playthrough of Spider-Man. I'm not another playthrough, I did another playing of Spider-Man. I'm working my way through a playthrough of Spider-Man on the hardest difficulty, and that's on my YouTube and Twitch pages. Links to that on my website as well. There's there's buttons on the side, but then there's also drop-down menus on the top. I don't think people see that always, or whatever. It's kind of hidden. I'm a terrible website designer. I don't know. What else is there? There's a blog. I released a new blog today, the Weekly Geekly. It's basically just TV ranking, and I talk about if there's any key things you need to know, and a bit about what's going on. I think I might put more about like exactly what this is, me talking about what I've got going on. I think there's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. So I remember, what is this song? I feel like this is a song. There's something anyway. But yeah, so the next episode, as I said, underage. This is a serious topic of conversation. I believe I started writing this story after dating a girl who had been abused by a much older, or had been manipulated and abused, and when she was underage by a much older man, and I kind of wanted to explore the way that older men abuse younger women, and I want to explore that in the confines of vampire fiction. Keep in mind, I literally started writing this. I started writing this right when I finished university. So I knew things, university things, but I learned a lot. Like, university didn't teach me much about writing. I feel like I learned a lot just from writing this chapter. So anyway, I will try to post these every Sunday night, maybe a little earlier, because there was that moment where I completely zoned out, and I think I started thinking about editing something, and then I just finished my sentence out loud and stopped reading the thing. It was a really weird moment. I apologize. I hope that didn't ruin the scene or whatever. But so I'm going to start at 10 o'clock Eastern next Sunday, and that'll be chapter 3, Underage. So tune in then. Until then, keep checking out 99geek.ca and all the parts associated with that. And we are the 99 Geek. Chill. Yes, and